0.1. 50% of far-right ideology consists of claims that progress is impossible. The other 50% is complaining about progress. 0.2. Atheists who can't prove that God does not exist are expected to call themselves agnostics. Yet nobody questions religious people who cannot prove that God exists calling themselves religious. 0.3. Always be wary when engaging with sources of supposedly objective descriptive knowledge. Many are loaded with ideological assumptions and implications. 0.4. Amorality is immorality. Immorality is amorality. 0.5. The modern monarch is a symbolic tyrant. The state of modern monarchy is one of symbolic tyranny. What does symbolic tyranny deserve if not abolition? 0.6. Socialism has three main definitions: worker ownership of the means of production, the government providing stuff, or the political system used by numerous hellish dictatorships of the 20th century. 0.7. All crime is representative of a certain philosophical justification. From its essence, a philosophical sentiment waits to be extracted. 0.8. Perhaps the strongest argument against hate speech legislation is the one that considers such legislation a grotesque overreach of state power. 0.9. Anti-abortion legislation can easily be regarded as a reprehensible overreach of state power. I certainly find this sentiment compelling. 1. We are complex creatures. Deciphering our self-interest is no intuitive task. It is a task of consideration. 1.1. The identities being forced upon children are not LGBT. They are heterosexuality and conventional gender roles. One's vision would have to be dictated exclusively by ideology for them to not recognize this fact. 1.2. There is nothing inherently wrong with voter shaming. Should we not shame someone who votes in a neo-Nazi? How immoral must a candidate be before voter shaming becomes acceptable? 1.3. Voting is a morally strategic enterprise. It does not necessitate tethering every fibre of one's moral character to a candidate and owning full responsibility for their every action. One votes based on the options, not the ideal. 1.4. Nothing is as irrational and repulsive as the idea that the will of the majority establishes the moral standard. Few things are more irrational and idiotic than the idea that there is any kind of serious connection between normal and moral, and not normal and immoral. Right is measured by rationality, not whatever irrationality happens to be the most popular among irrational minds. 1.5. The rational actor considers their capacity for suffering first and foremost. Following from such consideration, the rational actor recognizes that which undermines respect for sentience, corrodes empathy and compassion, normalizes cruelty and brutality, and ushers in a cruel and brutal society as the enemy. And so a rational moral imperative is born. 1.6. If your only defense is your right to have an opinion, your opinion is probably pretty stupid. 1.7. The rational approach is applicable to anything and everything. Have a thoughtful, creative, and imaginative personalized rational approach. Feel no more misery than you must. 1.8. People love nothing more than being convinced that they are right. A smart rhetorician will give someone a new idea by pretending that it is merely a natural extension of an old one. 1.9. Imagine yourself in an enjoyment-amplifying context. What could be more rational than this? 2. There is not one word people love to use hyperbolically more than literally. There is not one word people love to use literally, more than hyperbolically. 2.1. Many of one's greatest enemies lurk within. The internal irrationalities love nothing more than inducing misery and depriving one of happiness. Exercise rationality and crush the enemies within. 2.2. Public political debate would be utterly pointless if only people understood that being correct and being rhetorically skilled are two different things. 2.3. Sometimes we make the mistake of assuming that all spoken sentiments have some validity. Have we forgotten that the most idiotic and irrational sentiments can be spoken, and very often are? 2.4. Perfection only exists beyond reality. Perfection is that which is good to the point of impossibility. It is a model, ideal, and goal. 2.5. I haven't decided if neoconservatism is an ideology or an ugly mask worn by corporate stooges. 2.6. When you speak, it is important to consider definitions, not simply as you understand them, but as your opponent is likely to understand them. Communication is everything. One must either use their opponent's definitions, or make sure the opponent understands their definitions. 2.7. We must be careful with our political rhetoric. Overuse a bad label, and it will cease to be a bad label. It will steadily become more normal and more acceptable thanks to its overuse. 2.8. There is a bravery in facing a godless world. But perhaps there is also immense bravery in living beneath the tyrannical sadist that is the maker. 2.9. Is the capacity for reason not immediately rendered overwhelmingly invisible when natural selection has denied a being the blessing of opposable thumbs?